Hello, and good evening. A bit later than usual. I'm not sure if more people will be joining live since it's not our usual time for the study group, but I'm happy that someone showed up to the special edition of Keyboard Access and Focus. We have actually a lot to go through today, and since we already had a lot in the last session, I narrowed it down. So we're not covering everything that you also have in the study course. We're focusing more on the examples this time. Also because we have multiple interactive examples this time. So I hope you have the Andy download link ready for that. Just as always, we're gonna start with some housekeeping. I hope you've already been here, so you probably know that captions, transcripts, and materials. The captions should be in the same place as usual. I hope they're working. If not, please let me know. And we also have, as usual, the transcript going on. I have a bit of a different setup this time. So I might be not as active in the chat today since I will have to switch between screens. Also because we have some interactive modules today. Actually, I believe for at least one interactive example for each of the tests we'll be running. And as usual, you will find all the recordings, including this one, on YouTube. Maybe more people will watch on YouTube afterwards. In that case, hello, YouTube. And slides and transcripts are still on the Google Drive. Today's slides are also on the Google Drive already, and the transcript will go on there probably tomorrow morning as soon as it's processed. I also started making short summaries because who has time to read 20 pages of the documents or the transcripts? So the short summaries will be more, not necessarily more technical, but more concise on what we actually talked about during the session. So in those, I'll be going, a lot more concise. But on the other side, there will also be more of an incentive to actually look at the recording if something is not clear or if the materials from the course were also not clear. But they are more like as a short recap, and you can also find them under a special tab on LE News now. I also created a GitHub repository just in case, because I thought that is also a pretty convenient platform to have. So I will be trying to put all the documentation we have, and also since some of the examples we have are, I think, behind the login. So for me, they usually work, even if I'm not accessing them through the platform itself. But whenever I get logged out, I have to re-log in before I can refresh the page. So if that causes an issue, I will be recreating them and also putting them on the GitHub. Just that people who might not be enrolling in the course also can see the examples we are referencing, because otherwise I think it might be a bit confusing if I'm talking about hockey scores and peanuts and people don't know what's going on. So we have a total of 6 different, well, not totally different, but slightly different topics today. All of them within the beautiful but yet extensive world of keyboard access and focus. So you could also view them as like 2 separate ones, but I like that the section highlights just does actually put them together because they are very closely related. And I have always been wondering why, especially focus states are often more designed for mouse users. So I've seen a lot of mockups and a lot of design systems that focus on the joy of use of focus visible and focus states and the different states of buttons for mouse users. Whereas keyboard users are probably the ones who are, number one, a lot more common to encounter them, but number two, probably also a lot more likely to actually appreciate them if they're done well. So 4A is keyboard access, which corresponds to the 2.1.1 keyboard access in the Web Content Guidelines number 2.0. That is actually a bit of a disclaimer for today. We do not have any big surprises on differences between Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0 and 2. They are pretty much all the same. I believe one changed the name, but otherwise there's no difference. 4.B, keystroke timing. 4.C, keyboard track. And 4.D, focus visible. 4.E, focus of change of context, which is a bit of what we had already last week with the auto updating notification. And for F, focus order. Overall, a lot to cover, all very important. And yeah, let's start with 4.A, keyboard access. Then let's get into it. So keyboard access is, as I said, 2.1.1 keyboard access in 2.0. All functionality of the context is operable through a keyboard interface without requiring specific timings for individual keystrokes. Here we already see that this will be the same in 2.b, which we'll cover later, except when the underlying function requires input that depends on the path of the user's movement and not just the endpoint. It's a level A requirement. Yeah, it's basically said like make stuff keyboard accessible. Make sure it's on keyboard navigation and be very thorough with it. So it is exactly the same in 2.2. There is no difference whatsoever. And in the trusted tester process, it is a lot because this is not even everything. So first off, we start with identify the functionality and essential information provided by interactive elements. Then 1.8, possible ways to identify functionality include the mouse, the touchscreen, voice command, documentation of functionality, for example, shortcut keys. So any possibility how you could interact with the web page and the products, that's kind of the big thing, like find out how you can interact with it. 1.b, the title attributes feature in Andy. So we'll be using a lot of Andy today. Focus on elements, we already learned about that, can help identify any essential information contained in title attributes. Then point B, you examine the page and identify several interactive elements. So this is where you actually find out where things we can click and focus and interact with are. A, menu options at the top of the page with submenu options, very common, icons in the menu bar and links in the article. So the usual offenders for interactive elements. And we can use Andy Focusable Elements, which is the default module when we open Andy already. So it is, yeah, so far so clear, but it doesn't end there. Then we pair it with keyboard operation, and so actual manual testing to identify functionality and or access to the essential information. So how we basically tap there unless it's otherwise specified that we need to use specific shortcuts to get somewhere. So the standard navigation keys are tab, shift and tab, control tab, control shift tab, very clear there, and the arrow keys. And we also may need to use enter, space, escape, or element-specific shortcuts, which are then hopefully also stated within the instructions to bypass any blocks or access the elements as needed. Interestingly is also that a lot of these test criteria build on each other. So, for example, if something doesn't specify that you need to, as we start here, examine the page and identify several interactive elements, it is usually a prerequisite for the follow-up criteria. Then, I told you there's a lot of it. So we have our keyboard operation and manual testing. We have all the usual offenders for the arrow keys, shift tab, and so on and so forth. Now for interactive elements with title attributes, we place keyboard focus on the element. If tooltip does not appear within 2 seconds, keyboard focus will not reveal the title information. So this is specifically for tooltips. If an interactive element does not have any keyboard access, then we need to determine if there's another keyboard accessible method available on the page, which provides the same functionality. E.g., one of 2 print modes provides is keyboard accessible, that we can also see for confirming alternate version later on, because that's a topic for later. If an interactive element doesn't provide access to essential information via the keyboard interaction, we need to determine if the information is available elsewhere on the page, for example, as text instruction. Then we also need to note that not all browsers visually display the title attribute as a tooltip when an element has keyboard focus, and the shortcut keys are typically documented on the page or in the help documentation, so they should be discoverable by a user. You can't just assume that all users know how to use everything. That is usually not the case. Then for evaluating content, this is very straightforward. If both of the following are true, then the content passes. So all functionality can be accessed and executed using the keyboard, and all essential information can be accessed via keyboard interaction, or the information is available elsewhere on the page. Note that any changes to functionality that occur automatically or as a result of interaction within the page should be included in this test, and information is considered essential or required when the information is necessary to execute an action or understand information and relationships. The tooltip information that is not essential does not necessarily require keyboard access. It leaves a bit of room open for debate, like what is essential and isn't. So let's look at the do not apply examples, the DNA. Imagine you're testing a webpage with the title Famous Paintings. The webpage displays several images of paintings. The paintings are labeled with title attributes, but there are no interactive elements on the page. Now here, keyboard access does not apply because we do not have any interactive components we could access. We just have visual information. Second example, if the website is under construction. So we are testing a website for a new park that is opening in 2 months. When the users visit the park's website, the webpage displays a text that says the page is under construction. There are no interactive components, no links, no form fields, just thank you for your patience. So keyboard access does not apply because, again, there are no interactive components. Now, getting into the first passing example, you're testing a web page that has a number of interactive components, including navigation with drop-down menus, icon buttons, and tagging. So all the nice things that a website has these days, that I would say every website has these days. And we first start by identifying the functionality and essential information provided by the interactive elements. So possible ways to identify the functionality, again, include mouse, touchscreen, voice commands, documentation of functionality through any text instructions. The title attribute features in Andy is what we'll be using with our later examples because it's one of the fastest ones. So we examine the page and identify several interactive elements, the menus, the icons, and the links. Then we launch Andy, go to focusable elements, and select title attributes. This identifies an interactive element with a title element, global search, which appears to provide functionality or essential information. We will further look at this in the next step, but the title attribute associated with the photo does not provide information required to complete any activity. So for now, we can ignore that. Then we have used the keyboard to operate identified functionality. So basically, we do the manual testing. We look if what Andy found is actually correct and if we can reach it. In this case, we use the tab key and navigate each interactive element that we found in, well, step 1 with Andy. And we repeat the entire process and see if everything actually is there as expected, because last time we already found out as a big part of the process is making sure that mechanisms and stuff works as intended. So we use the keyboard, we use tab, various shift and control combinations, and or the arrow keys to navigate through the menu options, the submenu options, the icons, the links. Then we press enter key or spacebar to activate the interactive elements. And if anything navigates away from the current test page, then we just use the browser back button to return to the page. For interactive elements, again, with attributes, place keyboard focus on the element. So we're using the tab key to return focus to the search button. To review the title attribute, no tooltip appears when we navigate there, so that's fine. And if an interactive element does not have keyboard access, we will need to determine if there is a keyboard accessible method. Well, that is no use for that, or no need for that at the moment, because we have identified all interactive elements where keyboard accessible. So we're good. Now, the title attribute was initially flagged as providing essential information when revealing title attributes. The tooltip is not accessible using only the keyboard. However, the search text is available on the page as button text. And since the tooltip information is located elsewhere on the screen already, it does not need to be keyboard accessible because you have an alternative means of accessing it. And now if we go for evaluating for upon a keyboard access, both of the following needs to be true in order to pass. So all functionality can be accessed and executed using the keyboard. That is true. All interactive and functionality is keyboard accessible. And essential information can be accessed via keyboard interaction, or the information is available somewhere else on the page, which is also true because the only part that was not accessible via keyboard was actually available on the page. So in this case, the content passes for primary keyboard access because both of them are true. And now we are moving on to the first interactive example. This is just a very simple shipping information label, shipping information form. So we have the bare bones construct of what we usually need at the end of a checkout field. We need to add our shipping information. And in this case, Andy has identified 7 focusable elements. Ready, steady? Very good. So now first, we need to identify the functionality and essential information provided by the interactive elements. Again, everything goes here. Mouse, touchscreen, voice commands. This doesn't just come with keyboard, but part of it should definitely be using Andy and seeing what title attributes gives you in information. I'll leave you a second to do that. And as you examine the page, you should determine that the fillable form fields with at least visual labels include first name, last name, address, city, state, area code, and telephone numbers. All form fields can be selected by mouse and can be edited. But, oh no, the telephone number not, for some reason. So when you have focusable elements title attributes in Andy selected, you determine that there are title elements and whether they provide any essential information. Now I also have it here on the page, but as shown by the numeric code on page, the information title attribute is identical to what is available on the page. For example, no additional information is provided by the fields, by the titles for the telephone number format. Then number 2, we are looking to actually use the manual testing now. So now it's time for your finger dexterity or your access device dexterity to actually manually navigate through the form and check if all of the functionalities actually match what they should do. So use the tab key, navigate through the forms, and you should be able to access first name, last name, address, state, and telephone number. However, for some reason, we are not allowed to access city or area code using the tab arrow keys, control tab, control down arrow, or control right arrow key. So using the keyboard, we successfully fill in the form fields that are keyboard accessible, and we are moving on to the next few steps. So for interactive elements with title attribute, place keyboard focus on the element. If the tooltip does not appear within 2 seconds, keyboard focus would not reveal any title information. So we don't need to use this step because we do not really have tooltips. There's no essential information provided in the title attributes that isn't already there. So if an interactive element doesn't have any keyboard access, we determine there's another keyboard accessible method available on the page which provides the same functionality. Both city and area code are not keyboard accessible as we've determined, and there is no other method available on the page that provides keyboard functionality. And they are arguably essential information to actually filling in a shipping label. So when we are moving on to evaluation, we need both of the following to be true. All functionality can be accessed and executed using keyboard, which is already false because we are kind of missing 2 critical fields. And since both of the conditions must be true, it already fails here and we can stop the evaluation. And now for the second example, we have Office 365. We are testing an organization's intranet page that has information about the new software, Office 365, which is planned for release across the organization. And then we'll be looking at the manual testing. And if everything works as expected, you should be able to hopefully see the new tab. So we have, and you open, it's already on focusable elements. And once we tap through everything, I'll just do it in the reverse order. So if we actually see something, we can identify already this, the buttons. And we can also see that we have a bit of an issue with the focus state because we do not really have one. Now I'll give you the evaluation criteria. So both needs to be true for the content pass. So our functionality can be accessed and executed using keyboard, and essential information can be accessed via keyboard interaction, or the information is available somewhere else on the page. So please take some time to consider your verdicts and then share them in the chat. I think I'll have to add some screenshots for all the people who will be watching this back later. So any verdicts on this example so far, either through what Andy says or through manual testing. I'll also quickly go back to the criteria. We have a lot of criteria here from the previous one. So please do check if the title, the elements with title attributes can receive keyboard focus, if tooltips appear, if they are even there, or if there is alternative information provided somewhere else on the page. It is already a bit of a spoiler since it is a failing example that at least one of them has to be not present. Yes, exactly. They also don't show focus. And in this case, it's also because the 3 interactive buttons actually cannot be accessed or executed using the keyboard, only with mouse, possibly alternative methods as well, but none that I could test ad hoc here. So in this case, you actually can stop testing after number 1 because both need to be true for this one to be passed. And if one isn't, it's already game over in this case. I also found this very interesting compared to last week where we had a lot of knockout criteria. So as you might remember, all the mechanisms that you use to actually stop the autoplaying content, it always specifically stated that if any other applicable, not narrow defined criteria is not fulfilled, that it would require to be accessible, then it automatically fails. But in this case, we for some reason don't have this explicitly stated, which I found surprising. So moving on, very closely related is keystroke timing. Closely related because it is literally the same success criteria in both Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0 and 2.2. So it's a level A criteria still, and functionality of the content is operable through a keyboard interface without requiring specific timings for individual keystrokes, except where the underlying function requires input that depends on the path of the user's movement. So exactly the same thing we started at today. And because I skipped the notes before, this exception relates to the underlying function, not the input technique. For example, if using handwriting to enter text, the input technique, so handwriting, would require path-dependent input, but the underlying function text input still does not. This does not forbid and should not discourage providing mouse input or other input methods in addition to keyboard function. So keyboard function should always be a given, no matter what access means you use or input means you use. And keystroke timing, as the web content guidelines are the same on the success criteria, you also continue testing from 4.8. So all the tests we did in the previous examples, we kind of build on them, which also means if we kind of fail 4.8, either keystroke timing is not applicable or it's also failed. Once we have, let's say we have determined everything from 4.8, we determine whether there's any instance where the timing of the keystroke is required to activate the element. So for example, the speed at which the password keystrokes are typed could be part of the password authentication process. In this case, determine if there are instructions indicating that a key must be held down for a certain period of time or a specific amount of time that is allotted to complete a series of keystrokes, for example, with the password authentication, and determine if there are any messages indicating that functionality could not be activated because the action was not completed in the allotted time. All the content that requires keystroke timing must be tested, even if it appears at the function may be exempt because it is path dependent. And then we're moving on to number 3. If there is a time-dependent functionality, determine if there is another keyboard accessible method available on a page which does not require a specific timing. So again, we would need an alternative. And then for evaluating keystroke timing, it is rather simple. If it's true, it passes. So a keyboard method is provided functionality to be activated without requiring users to perform specific timings for activation. So basically, if you don't need to think about the timing of your keystrokes, then we're good. A does not apply example would be you're testing a web page for a park with a new visitor center that is opening in 2 months, just like our previous park. When you select the link in the park's webpage to find out more information, a webpage opens that has no interactive elements. So again, 4.b then does not apply because we do not have any interactive elements at all. In this case, neither 4.a nor 4.b are applying. And for a passing example, we are testing a web page that allows users to create a web survey. The web survey can include questions with multiple answers and by checking checkbox or radio button questions that allow only one answer. So instructions tell you how to add a question to the survey by dragging and dropping the question type from the menu and onto the survey palette. Alternatively, you can select the question type, then hold down Control arrow keys to kind of drag and drop the questions to the survey palette. And the final option allows you to select the question type when you press Control C and then Control P to add the question to the palette. So we do have drag and drop functionality, which we can activate using the mouse, but we also have options to access it via the keyboard, either through the Control arrow keys or through the exact keystroke, so Control C and Control P. And we have everything packaged nicely in a little written description for keyboard users here. So we don't need to try and error our way through this. So in this case, we are doing the same thing we did before with 4.a. We're testing if keyboard functionality exists, if it works properly. We're running the Andy tool to see if anything is indicated as an error. And then we move on to point 2, determine whether there are any instances where the timing of the keystroke is required to activate. So we hold the Control plus arrow keys to drag the question onto the palette, and although we need to hold both keys down until the question type moves into the palette, no key must be held down for a specific period of time, and no specific amount of time is allotted to a complete series of keystrokes. So we do have any time we want, we just basically need to combine those two keys. That is the only thing we need to think about. And number 3 on the test is if there is a timing-dependent functionality to determine if there is a keyboard-accessible method available on the page, which does not require specific timing. So for the copy-paste option, so Control-C, Control-P, that would also actually be another alternative method we can use if the previous one, the Control and the arrow keys, is not to our liking or not our preferred option. So we actually do also have a third option. Then for evaluation, yes, the web tool provides a method for functionality to be activated without requiring users to perform specific timings for activation. And because the one criteria is true, it actually passes OpenP keystroke timing. So very straightforward. Now we're going into the failing part. So this time we are also testing a simple web survey tool. Unfortunately, it's not as well managed as the last one. So again, the survey can include multiple answers. So we have checkbox and radio buttons, so single choices and multiple choices. And to add then questions to our survey, we are instructed to drag and drop the type of question desired from the menu and onto the palette. The drag and drop action requires the use of the mouse to select the type of question and drag it over. The accessibility user guide on the website states that the keyboard alternative to drag and drop is to hold the Control key and the right arrow key for at least 3 seconds until the question type moves to the survey pad. When we test this method, we confirm that this will work only if you press and hold Control right arrow for at least 3 seconds. So in this case, we determine that it is keyboard accessible, so it passes 4A, and we continue testing any element that is not marked 4A as DNA. But we also determine that it is very much time sensitive, and we also now need to look if there is any other option that we can avoid using time sensitive error controls. We do not unfortunately find them, so we will have to use the Control right arrow keys for at least 3 seconds every time, which means a keyboard method is not provided for functionality to be activated without requiring users to perform specific timings. So in this case, it fails to be keystroke timing because we need to hold down a specific combination of keystrokes for at least 3 seconds. So keystroke timing is also rather straightforward, I think, as in you don't want to have it. Just try to avoid it where possible. And if you have a very specific keystroke timing, you will need an alternative for it, because you're not getting around it. You kind of have to avoid it ideally, or provide an alternative means. So we have a second failing example, which you can again try yourselves. I told you we have a lot of examples today to try yourself. So this time we are testing a login page for an application that has 5 interactive elements. There are 2 text boxes that allow users to type in their username and their password, a login button, and a button that toggles between request password reset and request username. To activate the toggle feature, users must press and hold the spacebar for 3 seconds, and the page has clear instructions about how to select and activate the password. So I'll give you some time to try it out yourself first. Again, once you launch Andy, you can refresh it with the refresh button in Andy itself, should it rearrange the entire layout of the website, and then it should look like this. We see all focusable elements. We can check the title attributes, and there's already a bit of a red flag that everything except the request password reset gets a title attribute. We can also check the tab order, which in this case seems fine. So, I mean, this is kind of spoiled now since we only have one evaluating criteria to look at. And since it is a failing example, I wonder which one it failed. So since the request password and request username button kind of keeps toggling between them, it is very much time sensitive, and we do not really pass here, unfortunately, without getting a hang of the. And then we are already at C, keyboard trap. Any questions so far? No? Okay, very nice. So keyboard trap is also nothing new. I think one of the most infamous success criteria to fail, because it's also a very annoying one. If you just cannot move your focus where you need it, or if you cannot move anything where you need it, it's kind of a baseline, accessibility flaw, I would say, that does prevent the entire usability of a site. So its keyboard focus cannot be moved from a component to the page using a keyboard interface. Then focus can be moved away from the component using only a keyboard interference. And if it requires more than unmodified arrow or tab keys or other standard exit methods, the user is advised of the method for moving focus away. And note, since any content does not meet the success criteria, can interfere with the user's ability to use the web page. All content on a web page, whether it is used to meet other success criteria or not, must meet the success criteria. So this is kind of a block, because if you get trapped within the flyout menu, then it's game over. There have been no amendments to this one. This is exactly the same in 2.0 and 2.2. It's just apparently tried and tested. Still very, very much important as is. So why change a winning success criteria? Or a failing one, I guess. So from the TT process, we start evaluating this by using the standard navigation keys. So again, tab, shift tab, the arrow keys, the control tab, and so on and so forth, as we already did with 4.a, to navigate through all keyboard focusable elements on the web page. Then in the second instant, we determine whether any instances are where the keyboard becomes trapped, which is quite fairly easy to determine. You will notice if you're not moving anymore, or if you're very limited. So users are unable to move away from an element, e.g. using the tab or the arrow keys, or combinations of shift and arrow keys. And B, the keyboard access is restricted to a small section of the page with no way to navigate out of this loop, which often happens in either the cookie pop-up or a flyout menu or any other type of menus. Sometimes you just kind of get to the end of it and you start right at the beginning and you're just in a loop. So also note that keyboard focus should remain within a model dialog box until it is closed. So if you have a dialog pop up, and in that case, it is an exception. It is not a loop. It is actually supposed behavior. However, check for keyboard traps within the dialog, because if you don't have any exit buttons, you're still not getting away. And if a section of a page requires input or interaction before allowing focus to progress at the page of the rest of the page, this is not failure. This is actually intended. But again, as long as you can actually input the required input or complete the required interaction. For example, if you have a login or a paywall for something in front of often like articles have these, especially on like newspapers, paid magazines, these kinds of sometimes they also have a login screen because they give you X amount of free articles to read per month or per week or whatever. But in that case, it would be a required input. As long as you can actually complete it, that would still be fine. And then moving on to point 3, if you actually encounter a keyboard trap, or if the keyboard trap traps you, then inspect if any help, like contextual help or application help and documentation for notifications of available alternate keyboard commands. So any non-standard keyboard controls that you would not have tried yourself, for example, access keys, hotkeys, are provided to escape the trap, to flee the trap, and determine whether the alternate commands actually work. Because a mechanism can be great in theory, it's not worth anything if it doesn't actually work. So if we found a keyboard trap, we continue to test the interactive elements after the trap using the mouse to bypass the trap. And another option is to refresh the page and use the keyboard to navigate backwards through the page. Then, evaluating the keyboard trap, it is once again an all evaluation. So if all of the following are true, the content passes. So number 1, keyboard focus can be moved away from an element using either standard navigation keys or custom keystrokes, which are also documented and presented to us. Keyboard focus can be moved away from each section of the page containing elements. So we are not trapped in any loop. We're not prevented access to the rest of the page by using either standard navigation keys or custom keystrokes, which are then again presented to us. And the standard navigation keys are tab, shift and tab, control shift tab, and the arrow keys, just as they were before. We may also need like enter, spacebar, or escape, but any other element-specific shortcuts should be then listed and instruct the user. But these are the ones that you can actually try for yourself and expect users to know. How does this not apply? So in the first example, we're testing a web page that has a photo montage of pictures and there is no content that actually receives keyboard focus. So in this case, keyboard trap does not apply because we do not have any keyboard access in the first place. So in this case, none of 4.A until C and also none of the focuses are applicable because there is nothing that could receive keyboard focus. Example 2. We are testing a website that lists banking information and recent transactions. The links can be accessed using a pointing device, such as a mouse. However, Andy's tab order tool shows that no elements are in the keyboard tab order and no items can be accessed using the keyboard. The Andy output is a focusable element, not in keyboard tab order. You confirm that you can access the elements by keyboard, and in this case, keyboard trap does not apply because there are no elements that receive keyboard focus. Now, in this case, we actually would have tested for the previous A and for B, but since they obviously failed, or at least for A fails, for P would not be applicable, and for C would also not be applicable, because there's nothing there for us that works in a way that we can make work. And now we already have the first passing example, which you get to try yourself again. So please try it out again. We are testing now a web page that provides a keyboard accessible dialog box for uploading a file. We don't need to actually upload a file. Okay, unfortunately, the tab is not loading for me here. I hope it's loading on your end. I'm just going to assume that it's going to work for you. I'm manifesting it at least. So please try using standard navigation keys. So tab, shift, anything goes, control tab, arrow keys to navigate through all focusable keyboard elements, which is not that many here. And when you press the tab key to navigate to the upload files details button, the element that currently has focus is highlighted with a focus indicator. So for example, it might be dependent on which browser you're using. For me, for example, it's a black outline, but it could be a dotted rectangle. It could be anything as long as you can see it actually. It's fine. You press the enter key and then a dialog box should open. So you tap to obtain focus on each element within the dialog box at this point. And it should look something like this. So you can see I have this little black outline. I hope you can actually see it because it's browser functionality. And then it should, yes, you can see the dialog, it opens up. So, and in this case, we do the same thing. We navigate through. Within this dialog, we do have a loop, but presumably we would be uploading a file, so we would actually have things to do, and we can actually close the dialog. So in this case, it's not a keyboard trap because it is there for a reason, and the loop is also existing for a reason because maybe we just needed to see what is all out there before we go back to actually choosing the file that we need to upload. So then we determine if there are any instances where the keyword navigation becomes trapped. We have determined the order of focusable elements in the dialog box is shown by the numbers we add. Here we go, the tab order. So we have number 1 on the upload file over here. But when we're moving within the model, we are moving as expected. So we are looping between actually 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, and then back to 3. So we have determined the focus order. We have determined that we can actually navigate out of it. We're not trapped. And we are able to use the X button, the OK button, or the escape key to close the dialog. And then the focus returns to the upload file details button where we kind of started our little detour. Now, in this case, when we tap through the model box again and select each focusable element, for practice purposes, a message is displayed for each one. We can determine that we can use the keyboard to navigate each message. We noticed that initially they receive focus on the OK button on each message. In some browsers, you may also see the X button. However, the X button performs the same functionality in this case. So we can use the X, the OK button, or the escape key, and actually also the cancel one in theory, although it would, for functionality, would have different implications. But within this exercise, you know what I mean? You have multiple means of leaving the loop, and there are no instances where the keyboard becomes trapped. So step 3 is not needed in this case because we do not actually encounter a trap. So we do not need to circumvent the trap and see what else is going on. We do not have any traps here. So in this case, all of the following are true. the keyboard focus can be moved away from the element that receives keyboard focus using either standard navigation keys or custom keystrokes. In this case, it is standard navigation keys. And when we evaluate, like second part, keyboard focus can be moved away from each section of the page containing elements that is not trapped within a loop using standard navigation keys and custom keystrokes. So this is also true. We can move the focus away. We would have a loop within the dialog box, but that we have multiple means of closing, so it is not an unintentional loop. It is one that does not trap us. So now for a failing example, and we're sticking with the file uploads on this one, at least with the concept. We're moving on to a different page. We're just having a web page that provides a dialog box for uploading a document. We use first the standard navigation keys, Tab, Shift, Tab, and arrow keys, Control Tab, and so on and so forth. When the dialog box appears, the focus is shown with a rectangle around each element as it receives focus with the Tab key. And here the focus order is number 1, just test a course topic, number 2, new folder, number 3, back to just test a course topic. We notice that when tapping on the X button, when tapping through, the X button does not receive focus, which is already a red flag if you see that happening, because it doesn't mean good things usually. So we have now determined that the focus appears on the new, after focus appears on the new folder, the navigation returns to the TT course topic. So the tab key skips the X button, creating now a real trap for us and keeping us within this loop. So next, when you try other standard keyboard combinations, you can close the dialog box. However, the focus loops between the two links, and we are unable to close the dialog using only the keyboard. So we can go on to 3 for once and inspect if any help or documentation for notification is available. If there are any hotkeys, access keys, or non-standard keyboard controls documented on a page that we can use. And there is unfortunately nothing. We are unsuccessful in our quest for release, and we can't really leave this trap. We are officially trapped within the documents. So when we evaluate for 4.c keyboard trap, all of the following has to be true. Number 1 is true. Keyboard focus can be moved away from element that receives focus, either using standard navigation keys. That is true, it can be moved. And B, custom keystrokes, which are not documented on page, that does not apply because no custom keystrokes were provided. Moving on to the second part, keyboard focus can be moved away from each section of the page containing elements. That is false because we are very much in a loop. We tried using the standard navigation keys to resolve that, and the keyboard focus stayed trapped within the dialog box, and then we did not find any custom keystrokes to actually troubleshoot out of this. Therefore, it fails 2.c because the second criteria is false. So, and now we're slowly going into the focus part of this. So we're already in the second half. I know it's a lot. I hope it's not too much for you. So again, no surprises on the web content guidelines on this one. They are very much in accordance what it means. So same number across the years. 2.0 and 2.2 say the same thing. It's 2.4.7 focus visible. Both cases treated as level AA. Any keyboard operable user interface has a mode of operation where the keyboard focus indicator is visible. And that is kind of the same principle that applies to focus visible within the TT process. So we continue from C. So these really build on each other. We determine whether there's a visible indication of focus on the element that has a keyboard focus. And when the keyboard focus is on a frame, some browsers will display a visible focus, some may not. Where a visible focus is not available on a frame, we do not consider this as a failure of web content. So yeah, after completing the keyboard trap, we then basically after completing A, 4.B, 4.C, or 4.B if applicable, we review the page again to determine if there is any visual indication of focus. I think this is actually something that, although in the official process it is just at this point, this is something you notice immediately. That is, you will notice once you start keyboard testing because it's hard to ignore actually. In some cases, it may be necessary to navigate an entire page both forward and backward to determine whether some particular interfaces provide visual identification for focus. So if different elements on a page, they might have different focus states. I have actually seen some pages where most of it was browser-based, but then for some reason, like very specific arrow keys or arrow buttons had a custom focus state and that was barely visible, in which case you do really have to check the entire page to make sure you're not missing. So don't make any assumptions, actually go through it. And in case we confirm keyboard focus is on a frame where there's not visible focus, we then use the tab and shift tab combination to deduce that the keyboard focus is actually on the frame. So basically we're moving back and forth to make sure we didn't skip it or maybe just didn't see it. And when on the frame, a tab forward should move focus to the first keyboard focus element within the frame. From there, shift and tab wants to move back to the frame, and shift and tab again should move focus to a keyboard focus element before the frame again. Only the frame is permitted to actually not have the visible focus. That is fine. But be certain that the frame does not have a visible focus and not any other element. And when we evaluate for 4D, focus visible, all of the following has to be true, which is just one criteria. When each interface element receives focus, there's a visible focus indication. So very straightforward. In which case does this not apply? For example, a web page that lists major assignments and due dates. The page is text only and nothing received keyboard focus. So focus visible does not apply because there are no keyboard accessible interface components. In this case, again, nothing actually from topic 4 applies. Example 2 would be another web page with photo montages of pictures taken during a party. There are, again, no elements that receive keyboard focus, so we cannot apply focus visible. If we have, just no keyboard interactions, then we obviously don't have any focus, because where would it come from? How would we know where it is? Now we have the next example you get to try on how it's done right. So we're testing a little login page that has 4 focusable elements: the username, the password, the remember username checkbox, and the login button. And in this case, yes, we officially would continue testing from 4C. You can actually always take these pages and run through the entire process, but for this one, just focus on using the standard navigation keys and determine if there is visible indication focus. And when receiving keyword focus, the text fields usually use a blue outline to show visible indication of focus. In addition, the checkbox and login buttons use the black dotted rectangle to show visible focus. And again, in this case, it is true. Each interface element receives keyboard focus and has a visible indication of focus. So very straightforward. It's true, so we get to pass this one. And next up, we have a failing example. We are testing a website that has several keyboard accessible interfaces and interactive interfaces. When keyboard focus is on each interface element, there is no visible indication of focus. So there's no change in the color highlighting outline or any other cue that shows that there is the keyboard focus actually on this element. So in this case, it is failing because we do not see any visible focus. Here we have the second example, the history of peanuts. Each page has a link to additional information, or in the history of plants actually, but on the peanuts page we have additional information, but we cannot get to the additional information because the peanuts are not keyboard accessible, or they are keyboard accessible with the link, but they are not receiving any focus. So we can't really see if we are hovering over the link. So in this case, focus is not visible, and for the fails. Failing example number 3, this I actually think is interesting. I was thinking about just putting one failing example for each because, again, it's very straightforward usually. But this one I think is very notable to include if we're testing a website that has several buttons. Go home, open menu, save, and refresh. And in this case, as you can see, when we focus on the menu, we actually get a tooltip that appears and says menu. But since this is a tooltip, it does not count as visible indication of focus because they're not the same thing. In theory, yes, it does tell us that something is happening, or rather in practice in theory, it tells us that something is going on, but it does not count as a focus indicator because we cannot rely on tooltips. So D is quite easy one. Just make sure it's actually visible. Again, I was surprised that this didn't come with a requirement of it having to pass color contrast, which if you're checking according to web content accessibility guidelines, yes, it does, because otherwise it would not seem visible if we say we have a very, very, very light dotted gray line, for example. So compared to the previous ones we ran through, I was surprised to find that it's just written as like there's a visible indication of focus, but it doesn't specify visible by which means. So we are actually a lot more lenient and keyboard accessible and focus compared to the auto playing criteria we went to last week. So now for 4.e, focus of change of context again comes in both Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0 and 2.2 as 3.2.1 on focus. It is a level A requirement where any user interface component that receives focus, it doesn't initiate a change of context. So basically, nothing is happening by itself. Nothing is happening without you initiating it. And this again continues from the previous testing. So when an interface component receives focus, we evaluate whether an unexpected change of context occurs. For example, a new window opens on its own or focus is moved to another component. In this test, you are validating what happens when a component receives focus. This is actually also something that in practice kind of happens at the same time as 4.a. Because if something automatically moves, you will notice very much, or you will notice probably before you consciously text it, especially since in the previous ones, we also had to test the entire page. So we would have found it anyway. We just need to note it down separately. And then evaluating, again, very straightforward. If it's true, it passes. An unexpected change of context is not initiated when an interface component receives focus. So we actually want to activate the change ourselves. Just focusing on a link, a button, whatever an element does not trigger the change by itself. Our first passing example is the tsa.gov website, hopefully still and not as of the timing that this was made. It has a series of menus in a header that are keyboard accessible. So first we continue. We're just going to assume all our previous tests were very fine, very well made so far. And when the interface component receives focus, we evaluate whether an unexpected change of context occurs. So in this case, a submenu automatically appears, and this is kind of what it looks like. We have a travel menu, and then, yeah, we just get, at least we have like a bigger menu. This is just a snippet, and we get a travel submenu showing security screening, special procedures, TSA pre-check, passenger support, travel tips, and FAQ. Now, in this case, we notice, yes, it's keyboard accessible. It receives focus. There's no change of context. The submenu does appear on its own, but it also makes logical sense and it stays within the web page. Like, it doesn't disorient users. Yeah, we do have a change, but it does not change the context. It changes the content, not the context. So this passes upon the focus of change, a focus change of context, because the results are true. Meaning an unexpected change of context is not initiated when interface component receives focus. And now, since we see how it's done right, we can look at how it's done. We are now looking at, again, the history of peanuts, and hopefully you can also see the beautiful HTML that is the history of peanuts. And for some reason, once you focus on the link, you find out that peanuts have been around for a long time. Pretend here's an article about the history of peanuts, and our link just disappeared. So we do have a change of context, meaning we're directly taken to the article of the history of peanuts. I see you've been stuck on the previous tab, but you will notice it when you try it out yourself, that you are automatically redirected on the new tab. And then also your focus is changed into the new tab. Unfortunately, you were not taken with me into the new tab because only the old tab was being shared. So when we test for 4.e, where the interface component receives focus, evaluate whether an unexpected change of context occur, which it very much does. It launches a new window and it just takes you there. And we have to evaluate. It is not true, unfortunately, because we do have an unexpected change of context within receiving focus. So when the link receives focus, we are immediately taken to the history of peanuts without even us activating the link. And when a keyboard accessible link receives focus, a new window appears. It moves the user's focus to the new window and causes an unexpected change of context. And therefore, we are failing here. And we are failing again on the second one, leaving it in the chat view again. And I will take you to the registration form where we are supposed to add a street name, add a city name, add a state, postal code, payment, and then submit. And upon submitting, it triggers a dialog that says your address has been submitted, although we didn't even fill it out. We just focused on the submit button. So when we navigate away from the last form field, the dialog box just automatically notifies us that we have been submitted, although we didn't even press the submit button actively. So in this case, it also fails because, an unexpected change of context. And we're already on the last part with this one, focus order, which we already had a bit of before. Again, no big surprise here. Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0 and 2.2 treat it the same way. Both refer to it as 2.4.3 focus order. And it is in both cases still considered level A if a web page can be navigated sequentially and the navigation sequence affect meaning or operation, focusable components receive focus in an order that preserves meaning and operability. It is a massive wall of requirements to test, but stick with me. It's not nothing you haven't done before. So first we use the tab key to move the focus through the page. We are already well familiar with that. Then we determine if the focus order impacts the page meaning. So form fields for a mailing address are presented in the sequence you would expect. This is most often noticeable when focus order does not follow the logical order of operation, top to bottom, left to right, unless your cultural context provides otherwise. And then it may be necessary to use the keyboard to activate trigger controls that reveal hidden content within focusable elements. So think of menus, dialogues, modal dialog boxes, or expandable tree lists to detect the focus order form within the related content. Then it may be helpful to launch the anti-focusable elements and select tab order, but you can also use various tools for that. Tab order you will also find within the developer tools, for example. If you already tested with any on the previous ones, then why not use it here? It's there. And the backwards order focus doesn't have to mirror the forward order focus. However, it must preserve the meaning and the operability of the page. So it can't be like the complete remix, but it doesn't have to be the exact forward focus order. For modal dialog boxes, keyboard focus navigate between forward and backward should remain within the modal box until the box is closed to wait, which we already covered within keyboard trap. And then just some notes. The focus order does not necessarily need to be top to bottom or left to right. It is in the European context and in the US American context, it usually is, because that is considered the reading order as well. But again, if your culture reads from right to left and the content of the web page is also within your target language, then it makes more sense to preserve the focus order according to the language you're testing in. When the focus order does not affect the meaning or the operability, then this test just does not apply. I think this is actually quite, how much does it affect meaning or operability? I think that is someone you can argue about. And for example, a row of icons linking to social media may not need to be navigated in a particular order to be aware that it's just social media links. Then the anti-tab order markup may be slightly different from actual keyboard order, so always make sure to double check with the actual keyboard tab order, but usually it's nice to see it at a glance. When we're evaluating for focus order, all of the following need to be true. Luckily, we only have two things. The focus order preserves the meaning of the page, and the focus order preserves the operability of the page. So some DNA examples again are a website that shows excerpts from classic books. Each page contains text only. So we use the tab key and find that there are no components on the page that receive keyboard focus. This is following in the footsteps of the previous DNA examples where just nothing is keyboard accessible. So nothing applies. And example number 2, we are testing a company web page that shows an employee contact list that does not have any keyboard accessible components. So again, it might be failing the previous ones, but focus order definitely does not apply because we do not have any keyboard accessible components. And the third one, you can again try yourself. So in this case, we have a website that lists banking information and recent transactions. No elements can be accessed using the keyboard, but we identify some interface elements that can be accessed using a pointing device. Focus order only applies to the elements that receive actual keyboard focus. So again, when looking at the tab order, we just see we don't have it, but we can still interact with them on the mouse. I failed for the previous ones, but in this case, a DNA. So putting that into the real world perspective, it might also be the case that even if you fail previous ones within the topic 4, because we do have 6 criteria here, so we have actually a lot. The previous one, the following ones may just not apply. So make sure that when you take the test, you actually watch out for this one, because if something fails, for example, A, B, or C, that doesn't mean that it automatically fails the following ones. In many cases, it actually just does not apply because we are missing the keyword functionalities. And now it's time for a passing example. So we're testing a web page that allows users to subscribe to several newsletters by filling out a form. So section 1 includes text input field forms for names, address, city, state, postal code, everything that you apparently need for a newsletter, which is quite a bit. Usually you only need your email address. And in this case, you can also see the tab order. It is actually following the expected tab order of name, address, city, state, postal code. Then we're moving on from section 1 to section 2. I have a nickname. I have this is my permanent address. And section 3, business digest, how to invest for college, strategies to eliminate debt, planning for retirement, and stock market trends. So all the options of newsletters. Notice that my newsletter, Ali News, is missing from this. Please also subscribe there. And let's move on to, or at least move the focus back to our trust tester process. So I've shown it with Andy on the focus order, but again, please do use and double check manual testing because we cannot trust any processes. It's like one of the key learnings here. Number 1 is 3 seconds is kind of the golden rule when it comes to web testing. Number 2 is do not trust any mechanism to work on its own. And once we have completed that, we have determined that there are no model boxes. We are evaluating it. And all of the following are true. So the content passes, the focus order preserves the meaning. It is following exactly what is present on the page, and it also preserves the operability of the page. Here we have a second passing example. Then we're almost done with this. In this case, we do have a model box, which is why I included it, because since we didn't have one before, it's nice to have the contrast of how that looks like. So we are back to uploading our files. This time it is at least not auto-playing, and we have our focus order, which is as expected. So we're starting with the choose files that we are presumably uploading, the course topics, the new folder, okay, cancel, and then we can also just focus back on the entire frame. Interestingly here, it's not shown on Andy for me, but this is why it's very important to double check with manual testing, because manual testing does show it's actually there. And then we also have a third option, which I'll skip for now because it's already late and you've done so much. Please feel free to also revisit the sample pages in your free time if you're up for it, if you want to try more. We're testing a web page that allows users to search for birth records using parent information. So the search form includes several input fields for the mother and father. The form is presented using a table layout, which includes the father's form fields in the first column and the mother's form fields in the second column. And when we select Upload File Details button, we get a modal box. And now, just before the end, we have a few failing examples as well. In this case, we are testing a web page that allows users to subscribe to several newsletters again. And section 2, now in comparison to the previous one, let me just show you this one, yes. Section 2, for some reason, is after section 3. So you see, we are starting as expected with section 1, but then for some reason we're skipping to section 3, business digest. So we're going name, business digest, then back to street name, then to how to invest for college debt, then city name, strategies to eliminate debt. So someone really, really messed up the interactive elements here. So the keyboard animation is honestly very, very remixed. I don't think it's it's usually not that extreme in real world examples. But sometimes it does actually happen that you have, for example, all of the input fields on one side, and for some reason, one of the fields just skips over to a checkbox. Maybe then it also skips over to the entire section before going back. So in this case, we are, again, moving through the entire page to make sure we are not missing anything. We can double check with Andy or with developer tools. And we do not have any modal boxes here, so we don't need to worry about that. So when we begin testing the tab order, we find that that it alternates between section 1 and section 3 for some reason. So the tab order continues to alternate, and it does not preserve the logical order. In general words, it doesn't make any sense. And when we evaluate, we reflect that. And it does not preserve the meaning of the page. And it definitely does not preserve the operability of the page because we are skipping between newsletter subscriptions and our address boxes. And we have one more example that fails before we are done for today. So in this case, we are testing an ebook navigation. Yeah, we're testing an ebook navigation, but the chapters are remixed. So for some reason, we are supposed to skip chapter 1. We're starting from home, Then on the focus order, we're going back to 2, then to 3, then to 4, and then to chapter 1, and then to the end. So unless chapter 1 is some very crucial backstory that was written first, for whatever reason, it does definitely not preserve any meaning or operability. So maybe you could argue that the operability is still there, since if the links would be like correctly titled, they would still be operable. But since all of the following need to be true anyway, it doesn't matter. And it also just makes no sense to have chapter 1 at the end. So in this case, both of them are false. The focus order does not preserve the meaning. It definitely does not. And it does not preserve the operability. So we fail because they are just false. And with that, we are at the end of all keyboard tests, which was a lot to get through today. So very well done that you've survived until the end. You made it through. Congratulations. Here's your lesson summary. So the keyboard access we went through, test ID point A, referring to keyboard access, requires all functionality is keyboard accessible. This can include tooltips, drop-down menus, selectable links, buttons, essential title attribution information, icons, everything. Then, second one, keyboard timing. The test ID B requires that there's no functionality that requires specific timing keystrokes. If there is, then we need to determine if there is a keyboard accessible method that does not require specific timing. Then we have keyboard trap, test ID C, so no keyboard trap. It requires that there are no keyboard traps on the page, and if standard navigation keys are needed to navigate away from section or element, the users must be advised of this. And then focus visible, D, it requires that all keyboard accessible components provide visible indication of focus. The exception is the absence of visible focus on a frame, which is not considered failure of this test. And focus of change of content, so 4.E, requires that no unexpected changes of context occur when the element receives focus. So nothing auto-launches, auto-plays, opens a new window. Nothing moves unless you specifically want it. And lastly, focus order, 4.F, focus order meaning, requires that the keyboard focus order preserves the meaning and operability of the page, even if it is not identical to the visual reading order of the programmatic order shown by Andy. The keyboard focus should also remain within modal boxes until they are closed. And that is all things keyboard accessibility. So very well done for making it this far. Do you have any questions? We are already well over time anyway, so I definitely won't be hurrying away if you have any questions. If not, your homework for this session is to complete topic 4, keyboard access and focus, which is everything we have covered. We have a knowledge check and then an incremental practice exam. And we will meet again next week, Friday, at the usual time. And as the made a typo here because it is not 6 to 7 p.m., it is 4 p.m. again, as usual. And we also have the sign up link here again. So that will be the usual time, Friday, March 20, 4 p.m. European time. Not yet summertime, but European time.